In today's video, we examine the most clear Bigfoot footage ever recorded, from a hiker who filmed a massive upright creature for 47 seconds before following it, to a Bigfoot skeptic whose trail camera accidentally captured 77 seconds of stunning Sasquatch footage. On October 13, 2023, Emma Rodriguez had been in the Olympic National Forest for only 3 hours when she first heard the sound that would haunt her nightmares forever. The low, resonant call seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, vibrating through the ground beneath her feet and echoing from the trees themselves. She froze on the trail, her heart pounding as the sound repeated, too deep and too complex to be produced by any known animal, yet carrying an unmistakable intelligence that suggested communication rather than simple vocalization. The forest around her had fallen completely silent, as if every living creature was holding its breath in terror of what had just announced its presence. Emma's camera equipment began malfunctioning the moment she tried to record the strange vocalizations, her devices shutting down at seemingly random intervals, despite having functioned perfectly just minutes before. Her GPS readings showed impossible coordinates that placed her in locations that didn't exist on any map, while her compass spun wildly as if something was actively interfering with her technology. The silence that followed the creature's call was so complete, it seemed to press against her eardrums like a living thing, broken only by the sound of her own panicked breathing and the crunch of leaves beneath her trembling feet. But beneath that silence, Emma began to detect something else, the almost imperceptible sound of something massive moving through the undergrowth with impossible stealth. When Emma finally worked up the courage to continue down the trail, she discovered massive footprints pressed deep into the soft earth, prints that measured nearly 18 inches in length and showed clear evidence of opposable thumbs. The tracks formed a deliberate pattern around the area where she'd been standing, as if something had been circling her position while she remained frozen in terror. Most disturbing was the realization that whatever had made these prints had approached to within mere feet of where she stood, close enough to touch her. Yet she had never seen or heard its approach through the dense undergrowth. The depth of the impression suggested something that weighed over 600 pounds, moving with a grace that defied its massive size. Emma's attempts to leave the area were immediately frustrated by obstacles that seemed too coordinated to be coincidental. Fallen trees blocked the trail she'd used to enter the forest, positioned in ways that suggested deliberate placement rather than natural occurrence. Her satellite phone produced only static and interference that seemed to intensify whenever she tried to call for help, as if something was actively jamming her communications to prevent her from sharing her discoveries with the outside world. The isolation that had seemed appealing when she'd planned this expedition now felt like a trap, with Emma beginning to realize that she was no longer the observer in this situation, but rather the observed. Every step she took seemed to be anticipated, every route she chose blocked by obstacles that appeared too convenient to be natural. The first direct sighting came as Emma struggled to find an alternate route through the dense forest, her panic growing with each blocked path and dead end. Through the trees ahead, she caught a glimpse of something enormous moving between the massive trunks with impossible stealth, a figure that stood upright like a human but possessed proportions that suggested a creature of incredible size and strength. The being seemed to be studying her from a distance, its movements coordinated and purposeful as it paralleled her desperate attempts to escape. When Emma tried to focus her camera on the creature, the device immediately shut down, leaving her with only the terrifying memory of eyes that reflected the filtered sunlight with unmistakable intelligence, and what appeared to be curiosity about her presence in its domain. Emma's terror escalated when she realized that the creature was not alone. Sounds of movement from multiple directions indicated that she was surrounded by several large beings that were coordinating their activities with a precision that suggested advanced communication abilities. The forest itself seemed to be working against her escape, with branches that caught at her clothing in ways that seemed too deliberate to be accidental. and roots that appeared to shift position to trip her at crucial moments. Her attempts to document what was happening were frustrated by equipment failures that occurred at the most crucial moments, as if whatever was watching her understood the importance of preventing her from gathering evidence of their existence. The creatures seemed to possess an understanding of human technology that was both impressive and deeply unsettling. Emma's frantic escape became a blur of terror as the forest closed in around her. The deeper she ran, the more the landscape twisted. Paths vanished, landmarks shifted, and the air grew thick with the scent of earth and something musky. Every time she paused, she could hear the creatures moving just out of sight, their footfalls muffled, guttural calls echoing like a language meant for the trees. At one point, Emma tumbled down a slope into a shallow creek. The water was icy, shocking her back to her senses. She scrambled up, only to see a massive shadow pass silently along the ridge above. The creature paused, its silhouette framed by moonlight, and Emma felt its gaze settle on her like a physical weight. She pressed herself against the bank, barely daring to breathe, as the being let out a low, rumbling sound that vibrated through her bones. The chase resumed, but now the creatures were driving her, not just following, but steering her with uncanny precision. Whenever she tried to double back or hide, a branch would snap or a stone would be thrown, forcing her to change direction. She caught glimpses of more than one figure moving in parallel, their eyes glinting in the darkness, their movements impossibly fast and coordinated. Emma realized with dread that she was being herded toward a destination she could neither see nor understand. Suddenly, the forest opened into a wide, unnatural clearing. The ground was covered in spirals of stones and bones, and the trees around the perimeter were marked with deep gouges and strange symbols. The air was thick with anticipation, and Emma felt as if she had stepped into the center of some ancient ritual. The largest creature emerged from the shadows, standing at the edge of the clearing, its breath steaming in the cold night air. It raised its arms and let out a series of calls, each one answered by the others in a chorus that made the ground tremble. Emma stood frozen, her mind racing. Was this a warning? A test? The creatures circled the clearing, their eyes never leaving her, their movements deliberate and measured. For a moment, time seemed to stretch and warp, the world narrowing to the circle of stones and the silent, watching eyes. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the ritual ended. The creatures melted back into the forest, leaving Emma alone and trembling in the center of the clearing. She didn't wait to see if they would return. Driven by a surge of adrenaline, Emma fled into the darkness. The memory of the ritual burned into her mind. Even as she ran, she knew the forest was still watching, and that whatever had happened in that clearing was only a glimpse of a mystery that would never let her go. The psychological pressure of constant surveillance began to manifest in ways that Emma struggled to understand or control. She found herself anticipating the movements of her unseen watchers, adjusting her path to avoid areas where she sensed their presence, while simultaneously being herded along routes that led deeper into their territory. The creatures seemed to be learning from their observations of her behavior, adapting their tactics based on her responses, and becoming more sophisticated in their approach with each passing hour. Emma began to feel like a laboratory animal being studied by researchers whose intelligence far exceeded her own, trapped in an experiment whose purpose she couldn't begin to understand. The realization that she was being manipulated by something that could think and plan was more terrifying than simple predation. The most direct encounter came when Emma stumbled into a small clearing and found herself face to face with the massive creature that had been stalking her through the forest. The being stood over 8 feet tall, covered in dark hair that seemed to shimmer with an almost metallic quality in the filtered sunlight, with eyes that held an intelligence that was unmistakably aware and calculating. It studied her with the same intensity that she had been trying to use to study the forest, tilting its massive head as if trying to understand what kind of creature she was and what her intentions might be. The moment of eye contact lasted only seconds, but it left Emma with the chilling realization that she was being evaluated according to criteria she couldn't comprehend. The creature's expression seemed almost curious, as if it was encountering something as unusual to it as it was to her. Emma's attempt to slowly back away from the creature was met with a low vocalization that seemed to carry meaning, as if the being was trying to communicate something important or warn her about something she couldn't see. The sound was complex, with tonal variations that suggested it was part of a sophisticated language system, and Emma had the disturbing realization that the creature was actually trying to talk to her. When she continued to retreat, the creature's vocalizations became more insistent, and she could hear answering calls from the forest around her as other beings responded to what sounded like tactical coordination. The realization that she was surrounded by multiple intelligent creatures that were discussing her fate in a language she couldn't understand filled Emma with a terror that transcended anything she had ever experienced. The decision to run came when Emma heard the creatures beginning to move closer, their massive forms crashing through the underbrush with increasing boldness as they closed the distance between themselves and their subject. She turned and sprinted toward what she hoped was the direction of the main trail, her flight through the dark forest becoming a nightmare of stumbling over unseen obstacles and constantly looking over her shoulder for signs of pursuit. The creature's response was immediate and coordinated, with sounds of movement that indicated they were not willing to let their subject escape without a significant effort to recapture her. Their pursuit began with what sounded almost like disappointment, as if they had hoped for a different outcome from their attempted communication. The chase through the forest revealed the true extent of the creature's physical capabilities as they moved through the dense woodland with a speed and agility that seemed impossible for beings of their size. Emma could hear them crashing through the trees behind her, their pursuit coordinated in ways that suggested they were working together to cut off her escape routes and funnel her toward a destination of their choosing. The sounds of their movement indicated that they were not simply chasing her, but were actively hurting her, using their superior knowledge of the terrain to guide her flight along paths that would eventually lead her back into their control. Their footsteps thundered through the forest with a rhythm that suggested they were matching each other's pace, working as a coordinated unit rather than individual predators. During her desperate flight, Emma began to notice that the very forest seemed to be conspiring with her pursuers, creating obstacles that slowed her progress while providing clear pathways for the creatures that hunted her through the darkness. Branches caught at her clothing with deliberate precision. Roots shifted to trip her at crucial moments, and the terrain itself seemed to funnel her toward areas where her pursuers could more easily corner her. Most disturbing was the growing realization that the sounds of pursuit were becoming more organized and strategic, with different voices calling to each other in what sounded like tactical coordination. The creatures were communicating constantly during the chase, sharing information about her location and coordinating their movements with military precision. As Emma stumbled through the undergrowth, her panic-stricken mind began to process details that her terror had initially obscured, fragments of understanding that painted an even more disturbing picture of her situation. The creatures pursuing her seemed to be using tools. She could hear the distinctive sounds of implements striking wood and stone, suggesting they possessed technology that no wild animal should have been able to create or use. Their vocalizations carried nuances that indicated not just communication, but complex language, with tonal variations that suggested they were discussing strategy and coordinating their efforts with a sophistication that rivaled human military operations. The realization that she was being hunted by something that could think, plan, and use tools was more terrifying than any simple animal attack. The forest around Emma began to take on an increasingly surreal quality as her flight continued, with shadows that moved independently of any visible source and sounds that seemed to come from directions that defied the laws of physics. She found herself running through areas that her rational mind insisted couldn't exist. Clearings that were perfectly circular despite being surrounded by ancient trees, streams that flowed uphill, and rock formations that seemed to shift and change when she wasn't looking directly at them. The pursuit behind her continued relentlessly, accompanied by phenomena that suggested the very fabric of reality was being manipulated by forces beyond her comprehension. The creatures seemed to possess abilities that went beyond simple physical prowess, as if they could influence the environment itself to aid in their hunt. Emma's terror reached new heights when she realized that her pursuers seemed to be enjoying the chase, their calls carrying what could only be described as amusement, as if her panic was providing them with entertainment rather than simply serving a practical purpose. The creatures appeared to be toying with her, allowing her to think she was escaping only to cut off her route and force her to change direction. Their superior knowledge of the terrain gave them an overwhelming advantage, and Emma began to understand that her flight was nothing more than another part of their experiment, a test of her responses under extreme stress rather than a genuine opportunity for freedom. The psychological warfare was as deliberate as their physical pursuit, designed to break down her resistance and force her into complete submission. At one point during the chase, Emma managed to climb a massive fallen tree that had created a natural bridge across a deep ravine, hoping to put some distance between herself and her pursuers. But as she reached the middle of the makeshift bridge, she heard the unmistakable sound of the creatures climbing up behind her with impossible agility. Their massive hands gripped the bark with ease, their powerful limbs propelling them up the trunk with a speed that defied their enormous size. Emma could hear their breathing growing closer, deep and rhythmic, like the sound of massive bellows. And she realized with growing horror that they were actually gaining on her, despite her head start. The creature's pursuit took on an almost playful quality, as they began to demonstrate abilities that seemed designed to showcase their superiority over their human prey. Emma watched in terror as one of the beings leaped from tree to tree with impossible grace, covering distances that should have been fatal for any creature of its size. Another seemed to be moving through the forest canopy above her, keeping pace with her desperate flight while remaining almost completely invisible among the dense foliage. The coordination between the creatures was so precise that Emma began to suspect they were communicating through methods she couldn't detect, perhaps using infrasonic frequencies or other signals that were beyond human perception. As Emma's energy waned, she stumbled into a clearing she didn't recognize, one that seemed impossibly ancient, the ground covered in spirals of stones and bones. The air was thick with the scent of moss and something musky, and the trees pressed in so tightly that the sky was only a memory. The creatures paused at the edge, watching her with a patience that felt almost ritualistic. For a moment, Emma felt as if she were the centerpiece of a ceremony, the subject of a gathering that had been waiting for her arrival for centuries. The largest of the beings stepped forward, raising its arms and letting out a guttural call that echoed through the trees, answered by the others in a chorus that made the ground vibrate beneath her feet. Suddenly, the spell was broken. The creatures turned and melted back into the forest, leaving Emma alone in the clearing. She didn't know if she had passed some kind of test or if they had simply lost interest, but she seized the opportunity to run. Branches whipped at her face, and roots threatened to trip her with every step, but she pushed on, driven by a primal fear that drowned out all rational thought. Behind her, she could still hear the creatures moving, their calls growing fainter as she put distance between them. But even as she escaped, Emma knew the forest was still watching, and that whatever had happened in that clearing was only the beginning of a mystery that would haunt her for the rest of her life. The breakthrough that would save Emma's life came when she stumbled into an area where her cell phone unexpectedly picked up a weak signal, allowing her to place a frantic call to emergency services while still running from her pursuers. The 911 recording captured her panicked description of being chased by creatures that defied rational explanation, beings that moved through the forest with intelligence and coordination that suggested advanced cognitive abilities. Her call was interrupted by sounds that the emergency operator later described as unlike anything in their experience. vocalizations that seemed to come from multiple sources and carried an unmistakable sense of intelligence and purpose. The creatures seemed to realize what she was doing and began calling to each other with increased urgency, as if debating whether to stop her communication or allow it to continue. Emma's call ended abruptly when her phone lost signal, but not before emergency responders had obtained her GPS coordinates and a recording that would become the subject of intense analysis and debate. The creatures pursuing her seemed to realize that outside help was coming, and their vocalizations took on a different quality, less playful and more urgent, as if they were debating whether to continue their pursuit or retreat deeper into the forest. Emma could hear them calling to each other in what sounded like rapid consultation, their massive forms still crashing through the trees behind her, but with less coordination than before. The change in their behavior suggested that they understood the implications of human authorities becoming involved in their activities. The sound of approaching helicopters seemed to trigger a fundamental change in the creatures' behavior, their pursuit becoming less aggressive as they apparently decided that discretion was the better part of valor. Emma could still hear them moving through the forest around her, but they were no longer actively hurting her or trying to cut off her escape routes. Instead, they seemed to be withdrawing deeper into the wilderness, their vocalizations fading as they put distance between themselves and the approaching rescue operation. Emma's relief was tempered by the realization that her ordeal was far from over. She was still lost in a vast wilderness with creatures that could return at any moment if they decided the threat had passed. The creatures' withdrawal was not immediate or complete, as Emma continued to hear them moving through the forest around her for several more hours. They seemed to be maintaining surveillance of her position while staying far enough away to avoid detection by the search teams. Their vocalizations became more subdued but never stopped entirely, suggesting that they were continuing to communicate about her presence and the arrival of outside help. Emma had the disturbing realization that she was still being watched and evaluated, even as rescue teams worked to locate her position. The creature's ability to remain hidden while maintaining awareness of the situation demonstrated a level of tactical sophistication that was deeply unsettling. As the search helicopters grew closer, Emma began to notice changes in the forest around her that suggested the creatures were actively working to conceal evidence of their presence. Footprints that had been clearly visible just hours before seemed to be disappearing, as if someone was deliberately obscuring the tracks. Equipment that had been scattered during her flight was being moved or hidden, and the paths through the forest that had seemed so clear during the chase were becoming increasingly difficult to follow. The creatures appeared to be conducting a systematic cleanup operation, removing any evidence that might confirm Emma's incredible story about what had happened in the wilderness. The search and rescue operation that followed Emma's emergency call revealed evidence that supported her incredible claims while raising new questions about what had actually occurred in those remote mountains. Rangers found massive footprints throughout the area where Emma had been chased, tracks that formed complex patterns suggesting coordinated movement by multiple large beings. Her camera equipment was discovered scattered throughout the forest, positioned in ways that suggested deliberate placement rather than random dropping, with memory cards that contained hours of footage showing glimpses of enormous figures moving through the trees with obvious intelligence and purpose. The equipment had been handled with care, as if the creatures understood its value and had deliberately preserved it for discovery. The footage recovered from Emma's cameras provided the most compelling evidence ever captured of intelligent non-human life in North American forests, showing clear images of bipedal creatures that stood over 8 feet tall and moved with coordination that indicated advanced cognitive abilities. The beings appeared to be deliberately positioning themselves to be recorded, as if they wanted their existence to be documented, but only under circumstances of their own choosing. Most remarkably, some sequences showed the creatures using what appeared to be primitive tools and communicating with each other through complex vocalizations that suggested a sophisticated language system. The footage also captured moments where the creatures seemed to be studying Emma's equipment with obvious scientific interest, manipulating her devices with a dexterity that suggested hands capable of fine motor control. Analysis of the recovered footage revealed details that investigators found deeply unsettling, particularly the way the creatures seemed to be conducting their own documentation of Emma's behavior and responses. Several sequences showed the beings using what appeared to be primitive recording devices of their own, crude but functional tools that suggested they were gathering their own evidence of the encounter for purposes that remained completely mysterious. The creatures' behavior indicated not just intelligence, but also scientific curiosity, as if they were conducting their own research project with Emma as the unwilling subject. Most disturbing was the discovery that some of the footage had been edited or altered in ways that suggested the creatures possessed technical knowledge that exceeded what should have been possible for beings living in the wilderness. Emma was found 12 hours after her emergency call, discovered by search teams following the trail of broken vegetation and scattered equipment that marked her desperate flight through the forest. She was dehydrated and exhausted, but physically unharmed, though her mental state suggested she had experienced trauma that went far beyond simple fear of wild animals. Her account of being chased by multiple intelligent creatures was initially met with skepticism, but the physical evidence and recorded footage forced investigators to take her claims seriously. Most puzzling was her insistence that the creatures had deliberately allowed her to escape once they realized that outside help was coming, suggesting that their intelligence extended to understanding the broader implications of their actions. The evidence left behind after Emma's escape, strange tool marks, massive coordinated footprints, and her haunting footage, forced even the most skeptical rangers to admit she had encountered something far beyond a wild animal. The area was quietly restricted, and rumors spread of a hidden society in the forest. But Emma's story remained the only first-hand account. Her experience stands as a chilling warning. Some mysteries in the wild are not meant to be solved, and the silence of the forest may be watching, waiting for the next intruder. When Brian Phillips parked at the Farlow's Prairie Trailhead in Ocala National Forest around 2 p.m., planning a simple 4-mile loop through the pine flatwoods. The temperature sat at 73 degrees, and the forest was unusually quiet. He had covered roughly a mile and a half when he noticed something moving through the palmetto scrub approximately 200 feet ahead. His first assumption was a black bear, common in this part of the forest. Black bears were frequently sighted in Ocala National Forest, especially during spring when they emerged from their winter dens. He stopped walking and reached for his phone, more out of excitement than concern. The figure moved between two longleaf pines, and Brian activated his camera. Through the screen, he watched as the shape emerged into a small clearing. It was walking upright. The stride was too long, the proportions completely wrong for a human. The shoulders were massive, easily 3 feet across. Brian estimated the height at around 7.5 feet, though the uneven terrain made precision difficult. Dark brown hair covered the entire body, matted and thick. It moved with purpose, not the shambling gait of a bear on its hind legs. Bears could walk upright for short distances, but their movement was clumsy, unstable. This was different. Each step looked natural, balanced, as if walking on 2 legs was its primary mode of movement. Brian kept the phone steady, trying to capture as much detail as possible. The creature moved through dappled sunlight, filtering through the pine canopy. In the brighter patches, the hair appeared lighter, almost reddish-brown. In the shadows, it looked nearly black. The head sat directly on the shoulders with almost no visible neck. When the creature turned slightly, Brian could see the profile. The forehead sloped back sharply from the pronounced brow. The jaw jutted forward. It was not a bear. It was not a person. Brian's recording shows 47 seconds of this initial sighting. The creature moved from left to right across the clearing, never looking in his direction. Its arms swung naturally at its sides, longer than human arms, reaching past where the knees would be. The legs were thick and powerful, each step covering nearly 4 feet of ground. When it reached the far tree line, it paused. The head turned slightly, profile visible for just 3 seconds. The face showed a pronounced brow ridge and a flat nose. Then it disappeared into the dense understory. Every instinct told Brian to return to his vehicle. The parking area was less than 2 miles back. He could be there in 30 minutes at a quick pace. Instead, he moved forward. He would later tell investigators that something compelled him to follow, a curiosity that overrode his fear. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Whatever he had just seen, it was real, and it was in front of him. He stayed on the trail for another 100 feet, then stepped off into the palmetto. The creature had left disturbed vegetation, bent fronds showing the direction of travel. The path was unmistakable. Something large had pushed through here, and recently. Brian kept his phone raised, recording continuously now. The footage shows his hands shaking, the image bouncing with each step. The palmetto grew thicker off-trail, the stiff fronds reaching waist-high. They scraped against his pants and grabbed at his boots. Progress was slow. He had to push through with his free hand while keeping the camera up with his right. Sweat began to form on his forehead, despite the moderate temperature. The exertion combined with adrenaline made his breathing heavier. He tracked the disturbances for roughly 300 feet, moving deeper into an area where the pines grew denser and the understory thickened with saw palmetto and gallberry. The canopy blocked much of the afternoon sun. Shadows stretched across the forest floor. The temperature felt cooler here, away from direct sunlight. His video timestamp showed 2:17 p.m. when he stopped again. Something had changed in the forest. The usual sounds, the distant birds and rustling of small animals, had ceased completely. Brian panned his camera slowly from left to right. The recording captured his breathing, faster now, and the crunch of dry pine needles under his boots. He stood completely still, listening. Nothing. The silence felt heavy, oppressive. Movement flickered in his peripheral vision. He spun left, camera following. The creature stood 80 feet away, partially obscured by a dead pine. But it was facing him now. The footage shows a clear frontal view for nearly 8 seconds. The body was broader than any human, the chest barrel-shaped and covered in dark hair that appeared lighter around the face. The arms hung at its sides, hands visible, each finger clearly defined. The hands looked almost human in structure, but larger, much larger. Each hand appeared to be at least 12 inches long. The face stared directly at the camera. The eyes were dark, sunken beneath that heavy brow ridge. Brian froze. The creature did not move. It simply watched him, standing perfectly still in a way that felt deliberate, patient. Then it stepped out from behind the tree. The full height became apparent. Brian's angle, shooting slightly upward, confirmed this thing stood well over 7 feet tall. The legs were thick, powerful, built for strength rather than speed. Or so Brian thought. It took 2 steps forward, closing the distance to about 70 feet. Each step was measured, controlled. Brian's camera lowered slightly, his arm wavering. The footage becomes less steady. His hands were shaking more now. The creature took another step. Brian backed up. His boot caught on something, a root or vine hidden under the pine needles, and the camera jerked as he caught himself. He stumbled but did not fall. When he raised the phone again, the creature had moved. It was now 50 feet away. It had covered 20 feet in the second or two when Brian's camera was down. The speed was wrong. Something that large should not be able to move that quickly, that quietly. The recording shows Brian turning and walking quickly back the way he came. He kept the camera pointed behind him, over his shoulder. The creature followed. It matched his pace, maintaining the 50-foot distance. The spacing felt intentional, not close enough to be an immediate threat, but close enough to maintain pressure. Brian increased his speed. The creature did the same. Its movements remained smooth, efficient. The footage captured nearly 2 minutes of this pursuit. The creature never closed the gap further, but it never fell behind. It walked with the same steady, powerful stride. Its head remained fixed on Brian, tracking his movement through the forest. The eyes never left him. Brian glanced forward to navigate, then back to check the creature's position. Each time he looked back, it was still there, still maintaining that exact distance. The precision felt wrong. Animals did not behave this way. They either attacked or they fled. This was something else entirely. Brian reached the area where he first left the trail. He scrambled up onto the path, nearly dropping his phone. The footage shows dirt and vegetation, then the trail ahead as he turned to run. He looked back one more time. The creature stood at the edge of the trail, 40 feet away now. It had stopped moving. Brian ran. The recording went dark as he shoved the phone in his pocket, but the audio continued. His breathing came in gasps, his footsteps pounding on the hard-packed sand trail. The audio captured something else. A sound that started low, almost a rumble, then rose in pitch. It lasted perhaps 5 seconds, unlike anything in the Florida wilderness. Not a bear, not a panther, not any known animal. The vocalization seemed to come from multiple directions, echoing through the pines. Brian's running footsteps stuttered, slowed. The camera came back out of his pocket. The footage shows the trail ahead, empty. Brian turned in a full circle, nothing visible in any direction. He moved forward again, no longer running but walking fast. His breathing had settled slightly. The trail curved ahead, returning toward the prairie. Brian checked behind him every few seconds. The forest remained empty, but something felt wrong. He later described it as a pressure, a sense of being watched from all sides. The footage shows him scanning the tree line continuously. At 2:31 p.m., roughly 14 minutes after the initial sighting, he was approximately half a mile from his vehicle. A crack echoed through the forest. The sound was sharp, loud like a gunshot. Brian spun toward the sound. His camera captured a pine branch, easily 6 inches in diameter, falling to the trail 30 feet ahead. It hit the ground with a heavy thud that sent up dust. The branch had broken cleanly, snapped near the trunk. There was no wind. The air was still. Pine branches did not simply break on their own. Brian approached slowly, his footsteps hesitant. The footage shows him looking up into the canopy. The tree where the branch had broken stood at least 40 feet tall. Nothing visible in the upper branches. No movement. He stepped around the branch and continued. His pace had slowed considerably now. He checked the forest on both sides constantly. 20 feet later, another crack. This time from the right side of the trail. Another branch, this one even larger, perhaps 8 inches across. It crashed through the understory, breaking smaller branches on its way down. It landed 15 feet from where Brian stood. The impact shook the ground slightly. Brian could feel it through his boots. He stopped walking completely. His breathing was audible on the recording now, coming in short, quick bursts. He raised his camera, filming the forest on both sides. The footage shows dense vegetation, shadows between the trees. The palmetto was too thick to see more than 20 feet in most directions. He called out, asking if anyone was there. His voice carried through the quiet forest, sounding small and uncertain. No response came, not a sound. He waited for perhaps 15 seconds, the camera still rolling. Nothing. He started moving again, faster now. His walk was almost a jog. The trail straightened ahead, offering a clear view for perhaps 100 feet. Brian focused on that distant section, on reaching open ground. If he could get back to the prairie, to the trailhead, he would be safe. The parking area felt impossibly far away now, though it was less than half a mile. The third branch came from directly overhead. The crack was louder, sharper. It sounded closer. Brian looked up just as it fell. The footage captured his dive to the side, the camera swinging wildly. Sky, trees, ground, all blurred together. He hit the ground hard, landing on his left side. The impact knocked the wind from his lungs. The phone flew from his hand, tumbling through the air. It landed in the palmetto, camera facing the trail. The branch, nearly 8 feet long and as thick as a man's thigh, slammed into the trail where he had been standing. The impact sent up a cloud of dust and pine needles. If Brian had not moved, if he had been even a second slower, the branch would have struck him directly. The phone landed in the palmetto, camera facing the trail. The angle showed Brian on his hands and knees, scrambling to his feet. He looked up into the canopy, then all around. His mouth moved, words inaudible on the recording. He stepped toward where the phone lay, reaching down. Before he could grab it, a rock struck the ground 3 feet from the phone. The rock hit with force, embedding itself slightly in the soft sand. Then another, landing between Brian and the device. The rocks were substantial, each the size of a softball. They came from the right side of the trail. Brian jerked back, stumbling. A third rock hit closer to the phone, then a fourth. They formed a pattern, a line across the trail. Brian changed direction, moving left, circling to reach his phone from a different angle. More rocks pelted the trail, 5 more in rapid succession. They fell with precision, each one landing exactly where Brian was trying to move. They formed a line, as if thrown deliberately to block his path. The spacing was too exact to be random. Brian stopped. He stared in the direction the rocks were coming from. The footage, from its position in the undergrowth, captured his profile. His body language showed tension, hands raised slightly in front of him. Defensive. He took a step back, then another. His head turned slowly, scanning the tree line, looking for the source. Something massive moved through the palmetto on the right side of the trail. The vegetation shook violently, fronds bending and breaking. Something large was pushing through, and it was not being careful about stealth anymore. The sound grew louder, closer. Brian turned to run. The footage captured his legs as he passed the phone, sprinting down the trail. His boots kicked up sand with each stride. The sounds of breaking vegetation grew louder. Whatever was in the forest was moving fast, parallel to the trail. The palmetto rattled and shook along a 30-foot section. Brian's footsteps faded slightly as he got further from the phone. His breathing was ragged, panicked. The sound of breaking branches continued, getting closer to the camera's position. The entire understory seemed to be moving. Then it appeared. The creature stepped out of the palmetto 20 feet from where the phone lay. The angle captured it from roughly waist height. The massive legs, trunk-like and covered in dark hair. Each leg was thicker than any human thigh, the muscles visible even through the hair as it moved. The arms hanging forward slightly, the hands flexed, fingers spreading and closing. It turned its head, looking down the trail in the direction Brian had gone. The face was fully visible for nearly 4 seconds, heavy brow ridge casting shadows over the eyes, deep-set eyes that reflected light slightly, giving them an almost luminous quality. Flat nose with large nostrils that flared as it breathed. The mouth was closed, the jaw prominent and strong. Hair covered most of the face, but thinned around the eyes and mouth, revealing dark skin underneath. The expression was not aggressive, but focused, intelligent. The eyes showed awareness, calculation. The creature took 3 steps onto the trail, each footfall visible in the frame. The feet were enormous, easily 18 inches long, wider than a human foot. The toes splayed out with each step, gripping the sand. 5 toes were clearly visible on the left foot as it lifted. The foot flexed naturally, the arch visible. These were not bear paws, not costume pieces. The movement was too natural, too complex. The creature paused in the middle of the trail, turned its head back toward the camera for just a moment. The eyes seemed to look directly at the lens. Then it looked down the trail again, toward where Brian had disappeared. It dropped into a forward stance, weight shifting onto the balls of its feet. The knees bent slightly. The arms came up, hands positioned forward. Then it ran. The speed was shocking. The creature covered ground faster than seemed possible for something so large. Its gait was not quite human, the stride too long, each step covering nearly 6 feet. The arm swing was too pronounced, the arms pumping with tremendous force. But it was clearly bipedal running, not the quadrupedal gallop of a bear. The power in each stride was visible in how its feet struck the ground, sending up small clouds of sand. Within 3 seconds, it had disappeared around the curve in the trail. The sound of its footfalls continued for several seconds more, heavy thuds that faded into the distance. The forest fell silent again. The phone continued recording from its position in the palmetto, showing only the empty trail and the rocks scattered across the sand. Small clouds of dust still hung in the air where the creature had run. 43 seconds later, a scream cut through the forest. It was human, Brian's voice coming from perhaps 200 feet away. The scream was raw, primal, filled with terror and pain. It lasted 2 seconds, then cut off abruptly. Impact sounds followed, something heavy hitting the ground. A grunt, distinctly human. More sounds of struggle, breaking vegetation, thrashing, then silence again. Complete silence. The phone recorded nothing but that silence for nearly 30 seconds. No birds, no insects, nothing. Even the wind seemed to have stopped. The forest held its breath. Movement appeared at the edge of the frame. Brian came into view, crawling on the trail. He was bleeding from his forehead, blood running down the left side of his face. The cut was deep, possibly from hitting the ground or a rock. His shirt was torn at the shoulder, the fabric hanging loose. Scratches covered his exposed shoulder, some deep enough to bleed. He crawled toward the phone, each movement showing pain. His left arm dragged slightly, not moving correctly. The shoulder hung at an odd angle, dislocated. He reached the phone, grabbed it with his right hand. His fingers were shaking, barely able to grip. The camera swung up, showing his face for just a moment. The blood, the wide eyes, the dirt caked on his right cheek. His mouth was open, breathing hard. Then the footage went dark as he pulled the phone close to his chest, curling around it protectively. The audio continued. Brian's breathing was ragged, gasping. Each breath sounded painful, catching in his throat. Footsteps approached, heavy and deliberate. Not running now. Walking. Slow. Each footfall was distinct, spaced several feet apart. They stopped close, very close, perhaps 3 feet from where Brian lay. A new sound emerged, a breathing that was not Brian's. Deeper, slower, resonating. It came from directly above the microphone. Something was standing over him. The breathing was steady, controlled. Whatever stood there was not winded from the chase. Brian's breathing stopped as if he was holding his breath, trying to be completely still. The other breathing continued, a sniffing sound, like an animal investigating something. Long inhalations, processing scent. This continued for nearly 20 seconds. Each second must have felt like an eternity for Brian, lying there wounded with something massive standing over him. A low sound, almost a grunt, came from whatever was standing above Brian. The tone was neither aggressive nor curious. It sounded almost satisfied, confirmatory. Then the heavy footsteps again, moving away. Each step clearly audible. They grew fainter but did not hurry. The creature was walking, not running. The footsteps stopped somewhere in the distance, still close enough to hear, perhaps 40 feet away. Brian's breathing resumed, sharp and quick, hyperventilating. He did not move. The audio captured him lying there for another minute, maybe longer. His breathing slowly steadied, though it remained fast. Finally, movement, fabric rustling, the sound of him sitting up, a groan of pain, his voice barely a whisper, words unclear. Could have been prayer? Could have been nothing? The camera came back up, pointing ahead. The footage showed the trail, empty now. Brian panned right, then left. Nothing visible. He struggled to his feet, the camera shaking violently. Getting up took nearly 10 seconds. Each movement was agony. His left ankle gave out the first time he tried to stand, and he dropped back to one knee with a gasp. On the second attempt, he made it upright, but could not put full weight on the left leg. He started moving, limping badly. His left leg was not working properly. The ankle was either badly sprained or broken. Each step came with a grunt of pain. The camera pointed down at the trail, showing his boots and the sand passing beneath. Blood dripped from his forehead, leaving dark spots on the sand. He moved perhaps 30 feet, each step slower than the last. Then he stopped. He raised the camera again. The creature stood in the trail ahead. The distance was hard to judge from the footage, but investigators later estimated roughly 60 feet based on known trail features visible in the frame. It faced Brian directly, standing in the center of the trail. The lighting was better here, the canopy thinner. Late afternoon sun filtered through, illuminating the creature clearly. The footage captured details that had been obscured in shadows before. The massive shoulders, the broad chest rising and falling with breath. The arms, so much longer than human proportions, hanging relaxed at its sides. The face, mostly hair-covered, but the eyes visible. Dark eyes, watching. Not black like a bear's eyes, but dark brown, almost human in color. The creature's chest moved with its breathing, slow and steady. It shifted its weight from one foot to the other, a subtle movement, but distinctly visible. It did not advance. It simply stood there, blocking the trail, watching Brian with what could only be described as curiosity. Brian took a step backward. His injured leg nearly buckled, but he caught himself. The creature did not react. Its head remained level, eyes fixed on Brian. Another step back. Brian's breathing was loud on the audio, each breath catching with pain. Still no movement from the creature. It waited. Brian turned and began moving away, faster now despite the limp. His body was running on pure adrenaline, overriding the pain signals. He kept the camera pointed behind him. The creature remained where it stood, watching him retreat. Its posture was relaxed, non-threatening. It made no move to follow. Brian covered roughly 40 feet, each step visible in the shaky footage. He fell once, going down hard on his right knee. The camera caught the impact, then sky as he nearly dropped the phone. He recovered, got back up, kept moving. When he glanced back once more, the creature was gone. The trail stood empty. No movement in the vegetation, no sound. It had simply disappeared, as if it had never been there at all. The remainder of the footage showed Brian's painful journey back to the trailhead. He fell twice more, the camera capturing the ground, then sky, then the trail again as he recovered. He never stopped checking behind him. The forest remained quiet, no signs of pursuit. At 2:49 p.m., he reached the parking area. His vehicle was the only one there. The footage showed him fumbling with his keys, dropping them once before getting the door open. The recording ended as he collapsed into the driver's seat. Brian drove directly to Advent Health Waterman in Tavares, 35 miles from the forest. Medical records show he arrived at 3:27 p.m. with lacerations to his scalp requiring 12 stitches, a dislocated left shoulder, severe bruising across his back and left side, and a sprained left ankle. The attending physician documented Brian's account of being attacked by an unknown animal while hiking. Brian turned over his phone to Tavares Police Department that evening. The footage, totaling 31 minutes and 47 seconds, underwent analysis by 3 separate wildlife experts. All confirmed the subject in the video was not a bear, not a person in a costume, and not any known animal in Florida. The proportions, movement patterns, and physical characteristics did not match any documented species. Frame-by-frame analysis of the clearest shots showed details impossible to fabricate with 2025 consumer technology, including individual hair movement, muscle definition beneath the hair, and micro-expressions in the facial features. Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission investigated the location 3 days after the incident. Officers found disturbed vegetation consistent with Brian's account, broken branches at the reported locations, and impressions in soft ground near the trail. One clear track measured 17 inches long and 9 inches across at the widest point. Casting was attempted, but the ground conditions produced only a partial mold. The investigation report concluded that Brian had encountered something in Ocala National Forest, but could not determine what species. Brian Phillips recovered from his physical injuries within 8 weeks. He has refused all media requests and will not disclose the exact trail location beyond the general area of Farlow's Prairie. In his single statement to investigators, he described the moment the creature stood over him as the most terrifying experience of his life, not because of what it did, but because of what it chose not to do. The footage remains the clearest, most detailed Bigfoot evidence ever captured in Florida, and the only documented case of physical contact with injuries requiring medical treatment. Dr. Hartwell had established her research camp 8 miles from the nearest trailhead in terrain. Her equipment setup included 12 military-grade trail cameras positioned throughout a 2-square-mile area, each capable of detecting heat signatures from over 100 yards away. The location was chosen specifically for its isolation from human activity, providing perfect conditions for observing natural wildlife behavior without interference. What she didn't realize was that her presence had already been detected by something. Bigfoot's first contact was a vocalization. The sound erupted from the darkness surrounding her camp on the evening of August 18th, a low, guttural call that seemed to originate from multiple directions simultaneously. The vocalization lasted 8 seconds and exhibited a resonant quality that suggested vocal folds far larger than those of any documented mammal. What made the sound truly disturbing was its conversational tone, as if the creature were announcing its presence somehow. Bigfoot wasn't simply marking territory or expressing aggression. It was communicating with intelligence that approached human levels while remaining distinctly non-human in its execution. The forest fell completely silent after the call, but this was just for a while. Audio analysis would later reveal that Bigfoot's vocalizations contained frequencies that could travel for miles through mountain terrain, allowing communication across vast distances without alerting prey species to the creature's exact location. The creature's first physical evidence appeared the following morning in the form of massive footprints circling Dr. Hartwell's campsite. The tracks measured 17 inches long and 7 inches wide, showing anatomical details that placed them outside any known species classification. 5 distinct toe impressions were visible, including what appeared to be an opposable thumb, while the depth of the prints suggested something weighing at least 600 pounds had made them during the night. Bigfoot's foot structure revealed adaptations that were perfectly suited for life in dense forest environments. Most significantly, the dermal ridges visible in the clearest prints showed characteristics that were neither human nor ape, but something entirely unique. Bigfoot had approached Dr. Hartwell's camp from multiple angles, studying her setup and identifying potential escape routes while maintaining perfect stealth. The tracks showed it had come within 15 feet of her tent, close enough to observe her sleeping form through the fabric before retreating into the forest without making a sound that might wake her. The creature's approach pattern demonstrated understanding of human behavior and defensive capabilities that could only have been learned through extensive observation of human activity. Bigfoot had identified the most vulnerable points in the camp's perimeter and had tested Dr. Hartwell's awareness levels by approaching from different directions throughout the night. This was reconnaissance behavior that indicated military-level tactical thinking. The second night brought escalation in the creature's stalking behavior that demonstrated coordinated intelligence beyond anything documented in cryptid research. Multiple vocalizations erupted around Dr. Hartwell's camp at 2:30 a.m., coming from different locations in a pattern that suggested either several Bigfoot working together or one creature moving with supernatural stealth through the mountain terrain. The coordinated nature of the calls indicated social structure and communication protocols that had evolved over thousands of generations. Each vocalization seemed to serve a specific purpose. Some were clearly positional reports, others appeared to be tactical updates, and still others carried emotional content that suggested the creatures were capable of complex social interactions. Bigfoot were not solitary animals, but members of a sophisticated society that had remained hidden from human detection for centuries. Between the calls, heavy footsteps circled the campsite in a deliberate pattern that revealed the creature's understanding of psychological warfare. Bigfoot was applying pressure without direct confrontation, testing Dr. Hartwell's responses and building fear through sustained presence rather than immediate attack. The palm structure suggested grip strength that could crush bone, while the fingertip patterns showed sensitivity that would allow for delicate manipulation of small objects. The creature had demonstrated remarkable restraint and intelligence by carefully lowering the food cache, examining its contents, and returning it to its original position without taking anything. This behavior indicated Bigfoot understood human food storage methods and possessed the manual dexterity to manipulate complex rope systems. systems. More importantly, it showed the creature was studying human behavior rather than simply seeking easy food sources. The rope manipulation required understanding of mechanical advantage and not systems that suggested tool use capabilities far beyond any known primate. Bigfoot had solved the puzzle of the suspended cache without damaging the equipment, demonstrating problem-solving skills that indicated abstract thinking and planning abilities. The creature was capable of understanding cause and effect relationships and applying that knowledge to achieve specific objectives. The creature's message was unmistakable. It could access anything in the camp at any time, but was choosing to observe rather than attack. This level of strategic thinking and self-control indicated intelligence that approached human levels while remaining distinctly alien in its application. Bigfoot was conducting its own research on the human intruder in its territory, gathering information about human capabilities and intentions. This was hunting behavior that indicated intelligence far beyond simple predatory instinct. The creature was studying human psychology and using fear as a tool for control. The footsteps showed remarkable coordination and timing, with the creature maintaining perfect distance from the camp while varying its approach angles to prevent Dr. Hartwell from predicting its location. Bigfoot was demonstrating its ability to maintain surveillance while remaining undetected, a skill that required understanding of human sensory limitations and tactical awareness that approached military training levels. The creature's vocalizations showed complex tonal variations that suggested structured communication. Audio analysis would later reveal harmonic frequencies and rhythmic patterns that didn't match any known North American wildlife, with characteristics that indicated Bigfoot was capable of conveying detailed information through sound alone. The calls seemed designed to coordinate movement and share tactical information about the human target. The vocal patterns also revealed emotional content that suggested the creatures were capable of complex feelings and social bonds. Some calls carried what appeared to be concern or curiosity, while others showed clear territorial assertion and dominance displays. Bigfoot were not mindless beasts, but thinking beings with rich emotional lives and sophisticated social structures. Dawn revealed the full extent of the creature's capabilities. Massive handprints were pressed into the bark of a pine tree beside Dr. Hartwell's food cache, which had been suspended 15 feet above ground, according to standard bear safety protocols. The handprints showed 5 fingers with clear opposable thumbs, and the reach required to touch the cache indicated something standing at least 8 feet tall with arm span that exceeded human proportions. Bigfoot's hand structure revealed evolutionary adaptations that were perfectly suited for forest life. The fingers showed remarkable length and dexterity, with joint articulation that indicated the ability to manipulate complex objects and use tools. The third night brought the most sophisticated display of Bigfoot behavior ever documented. The creature's vocalizations began at 11:47 p.m., but were accompanied by rhythmic tree knocking that echoed through the valley in coordinated patterns. The impacts came from at least 3 different locations, suggesting multiple Bigfoot communicating through wood percussion in a language that had evolved over millennia. The tree knocking demonstrated tool use and environmental manipulation that placed Bigfoot intelligence far above simple primate behavior. The creatures were using the forest itself as a communication network, sending messages across vast distances through acoustic signals that could convey complex tactical information. The coordination required for such communication indicated social structure and cultural development that challenged every assumption about cryptid capabilities. Each impact was precisely timed and positioned to create specific acoustic effects that could carry different types of information. Bigfoot were using variations in rhythm, intensity, and location to create a sophisticated communication system that took advantage of the mountain terrain's acoustic properties. This was technology that had been developed over thousands of years of evolution in forest environments. The tree knocking also served as psychological warfare, creating an atmosphere of being surrounded and outnumbered that was designed to increase stress and reduce rational thinking in the human target. Bigfoot understood that fear could be used as a weapon, and they were applying psychological pressure with the same precision they used for physical stalking. At 1:15 a.m., the lead Bigfoot approached Dr. Hartwell's tent with deliberate stealth that showcased its predatory expertise. The creature's breathing was audible through the fabric, heavy and measured, indicating something with lung capacity far exceeding human norms. The respiratory pattern suggested a cardiovascular system that was adapted for sustained physical activity at high altitude with oxygen processing efficiency that allowed for extended periods of intense exertion. When the creature pressed against the tent wall, the massive hand that splayed across the fabric was easily twice the size of a human hand, with fingers that showed remarkable dexterity and control. The pressure was carefully modulated to avoid tearing the fabric while still conveying the creature's immense strength and reach. Bigfoot was demonstrating its physical capabilities while showing restraint that indicated sophisticated understanding of human fragility. The creature's touch was exploratory rather than aggressive, demonstrating curiosity about human shelter construction and the vulnerable being inside. Bigfoot was conducting a physical examination of its target, learning about human defensive capabilities while demonstrating its ability to reach Dr. Hartwell at any moment. The psychological impact was devastating. The creature was establishing dominance through proximity rather than violence. The hand movements showed remarkable sensitivity and control, with the creature apparently able to feel Dr. Hartwell's heartbeat and breathing through the tent fabric. Bigfoot was gathering physiological information about human stress responses and fear reactions, adding to its understanding of human psychology and behavior patterns. This was scientific observation being conducted by a non-human intelligence. The pressure against the tent lasted 90 seconds, during which Bigfoot seemed to be processing information about human scent, body heat, and fear responses. When it finally withdrew, the creature moved with perfect silence despite its massive size, demonstrating stealth capabilities that allowed it to appear and disappear like a ghost in the mountain wilderness. Bigfoot's movement skills were so advanced that it could control every aspect of its interaction with the environment. Bigfoot's approach to the creek revealed systematic behavior patterns that suggested this was regular territory maintenance rather than random wandering. The creature followed specific paths through the forest that had been established over years of use, with route selection that minimized exposure while maximizing efficiency. Bigfoot's movement patterns showed understanding of terrain advantages and tactical positioning that indicated military-level strategic thinking. The creature's behavior at the creek revealed routine patterns that suggested this was regular territory rather than a chance encounter. Bigfoot approached the water with obvious familiarity, scanning the surroundings with systematic precision before crouching to drink. Its movements were economical and purposeful, indicating intelligence that planned each action for maximum efficiency and minimum exposure. The drinking behavior itself revealed physiological adaptations that were perfectly suited for wilderness survival. The creature's mouth and throat structure allowed for rapid water consumption while maintaining alertness for potential threats. Bigfoot could process large quantities of water quickly while keeping its head positioned for immediate response to danger, demonstrating evolutionary refinements that had been perfected over millions of years. Most significantly, the creature's posture and alertness suggested it was aware of the camera's presence, but had chosen to allow itself to be recorded. Bigfoot was controlling the documentation process, revealing itself only when and how it chose, rather than being caught unaware. This level of technological awareness indicated the creature had been observing human activity for extended periods and understood the purpose of recording equipment. The creature's decision to allow documentation suggested a deliberate choice to make contact with human researchers under controlled conditions. Bigfoot was managing the encounter to ensure its own safety while providing evidence of its existence to the scientific community. This indicated long-term strategic thinking and understanding of human social structures that went far beyond simple animal intelligence. The creature's decision to relocate closer to the creek on August 22nd demonstrated tactical adaptation that proved its intelligence was actively processing Dr. Hartwell's behavior. Bigfoot recognized that she was preparing for closer observation and adjusted its own strategy accordingly. Rather than avoiding the area, it chose to use her expectations against her, turning her research setup into an opportunity for controlled contact. The relocation also revealed the creature's understanding of human technology and research methods. Bigfoot had observed Dr. Hartwell's camera placement and equipment setup, understanding that she was attempting to document its presence. Instead of avoiding the surveillance, the creature chose to use it for its own purposes, demonstrating intelligence that could adapt human tools to achieve its own objectives. The forest's unnatural silence on the final day indicated Bigfoot's presence was affecting the entire ecosystem. Birds, insects, and small mammals had fled the area, recognizing the apex predator's dominance over their territory. The creature's influence extended far beyond its physical presence, creating a zone of control that encompassed several square miles of wilderness. The ecosystem's response to Bigfoot's presence revealed the creature's position at the top of the forest food chain. Every other species recognized its dominance and adjusted their behavior accordingly, creating a buffer zone around the creature's territory that ensured privacy for the final encounter. Bigfoot's ecological impact demonstrated its role as a keystone species that shaped the behavior of entire forest communities. As darkness fell on August 22nd, Bigfoot began its approach to the creek, with deliberate timing that suggested it had been monitoring Dr. Hartwell's position throughout the day. The creature's footsteps were audible from a distance, indicating it was no longer concerned with stealth, but was instead announcing its arrival for the final encounter. The psychological impact was carefully calculated to build anticipation and ensure Dr. Hartwell was prepared to document what was about to occur. The creature's approach pattern revealed confidence and control that indicated it was operating entirely on its own terms. Bigfoot had spent 5 days studying its human observer and had concluded that she posed no threat to its safety or territory. The final approach was a demonstration of trust and perhaps respect for Dr. Hartwell's persistence and courage in remaining in the wilderness despite obvious danger. At 8:41 p.m., Bigfoot emerged from the tree line, revealing itself in unprecedented detail. The creature stood 7.5 feet tall, with shoulders that were impossibly broad and arms that hung past its knees. Its entire body was covered in dark reddish-brown hair that showed natural variation and movement, proving this was living tissue rather than any artificial construction. The creature's hair showed seasonal adaptations and environmental conditioning that indicated a lifetime spent in mountain wilderness. The coat was thick and weather-resistant, with natural oils that provided protection against moisture and temperature extremes. The hair patterns showed wear marks from movement through dense vegetation, proving this was a wild animal that had never been in captivity or human contact. Bigfoot's head was conical with a prominent sagittal crest that indicated massive jaw muscles capable of crushing bone. Its face blended human and ape characteristics in ways that defied classification, with a flat nose, prominent brow ridge, and eyes that held unmistakable intelligence. The creature's facial structure suggested evolutionary adaptations that were perfectly suited for life in dense forest environments. The sagittal crest revealed muscle attachment points that indicated bite force far exceeding any known primate, while the jaw structure suggested the ability to process a wide variety of food sources. Bigfoot's dental adaptations allowed for both meat consumption and plant processing, indicating an omnivorous diet that could adapt to seasonal food availability in mountain environments. The creature's gaze was alert and calculating, constantly scanning the environment with predatory awareness that missed nothing. The eyes showed intelligence that transcended simple animal consciousness, with focus and attention that indicated active thinking and decision-making processes. Bigfoot was not operating on instinct alone, but was actively analyzing the situation and planning its responses. The creature's movement patterns revealed perfect adaptation for forest environments. Its gait was fluid and compliant, with knees slightly bent and weight rolling from heel to toe in a motion no human could replicate comfortably. Every step was placed with precision that avoided disturbing loose rocks or breaking branches, demonstrating stealth capabilities that had been refined over millions of years of evolution. Bigfoot's locomotion showed remarkable efficiency and grace despite its massive size. The creature could move through dense forest without creating noise or disturbance, indicating muscle control and coordination that exceeded any known primate capabilities. The movement patterns suggested the ability to switch between different gaits depending on terrain and tactical requirements. The creature's behavior was natural and unhurried, suggesting this was routine territory maintenance rather than a special event. Its massive hands showed remarkable dexterity as it cupped water, with opposable thumbs that indicated tool use capabilities far beyond any known primate. The drinking behavior revealed physiological adaptations that were perfectly suited for wilderness survival. The creature's mouth and throat structure allowed for efficient water consumption while maintaining alertness for potential threats. Bigfoot could process water quickly while keeping its senses focused on environmental monitoring, demonstrating evolutionary refinements that had been perfected over millions of years. The creature's hands showed evolutionary adaptations that were perfectly suited for forest life. The fingers displayed remarkable length and dexterity, with joint articulation that indicated the ability to manipulate complex objects and use tools. The palm structure suggested grip strength that could crush bone, while the fingertip patterns showed sensitivity that would allow for delicate manipulation of small objects. The creature's intelligence was evident in every movement and gesture. It paused frequently to scan the forest with systematic precision, its head turning in patterns that indicated tactical awareness of potential threats from multiple directions. Bigfoot's eyes reflected the camera's infrared light with an amber-green glow that seemed to pierce directly through the darkness to Dr. Hartwell's hiding place. The scanning behavior revealed understanding of environmental threats and tactical positioning that indicated military-level awareness. The creature's head movements followed patterns that ensured complete coverage of potential approach routes while maintaining focus on the primary task of drinking. Bigfoot was capable of multitasking at levels that exceeded human capabilities. At one point, the creature looked directly toward the camera position with an expression that was unmistakably aware and curious. Bigfoot knew it was being recorded and had known throughout the entire encounter, but it had chosen to reveal itself on its own terms rather than being discovered accidentally. This level of control over the documentation process indicated intelligence that approached human levels while remaining distinctly alien in its application. The direct gaze revealed eyes that held ancient wisdom and intelligence that had been observing human activity for generations. The creature's expression showed curiosity about the human observer, but no fear or aggression, suggesting confidence in its own abilities and understanding of the situation. Bigfoot was making a conscious choice to allow documentation of its existence. The creature's facial features were clearly visible in profile as it drank, showing bone structure that was massive and robust, designed to support tremendous muscle mass while maintaining the flexibility required for complex facial expressions. Bigfoot's eyes held an awareness that transcended simple animal consciousness, suggesting cognitive capabilities that challenged every assumption about non-human intelligence. The facial structure revealed evolutionary adaptations that were perfectly suited for communication and social interaction. The creature's expressions showed emotional range and complexity that indicated rich inner life and sophisticated social bonds. Bigfoot was not a mindless beast, but a thinking being with complex thoughts and feelings. When the creature finished drinking, it stood slowly and turned to face Dr. Hartwell's position directly, acknowledging her presence with a gaze that was neither hostile nor friendly, but simply aware. For a moment that lasted an eternity, the ancient intelligence behind those amber eyes studied the human who had been trying so desperately to document its existence, perhaps evaluating whether she was worthy of this unprecedented revelation. The final exchange between human and Bigfoot represented a moment of contact between two intelligent species that had shared the continent for thousands of years without official recognition. The creature's acknowledgement of Dr. Hartwell's presence suggested respect for her persistence and courage, while also serving as a warning that future encounters would be entirely on Bigfoot's terms. Then, without haste or concern, Bigfoot turned and walked back into the forest, its massive form disappearing into the darkness with the same supernatural stealth it had demonstrated throughout the 5-day encounter. The creature had accomplished its objective, allowing itself to be documented clearly enough to prove its existence while maintaining complete control over the terms of contact, leaving behind 58 seconds of footage that would change cryptozoology forever. David had worked for 11 years in Yellowstone's backcountry, and his October 15th morning started with reports from experienced backpackers near Cache Creek. They'd heard sounds that didn't match any known animal, deep whooping sounds in call and response patterns. But these were not mating calls, nor territorial warnings. It sounded like an actual language. What Krueger didn't know yet was that his body cam would soon capture proof of exactly what those sounds meant. The Cache Creek was a common Bigfoot habitat, remote enough for privacy and close enough to major trail systems to monitor human activity. If you wanted to disappear for a while, this was the perfect place. At 2:15 p.m., Krueger headed toward the area on foot. The route took him through dense pine forests and natural bottlenecks, exactly the kind of terrain where something smart could stay hidden. If there were Bigfoots here, they'd be able to watch his every step and choose exactly where any encounter would happen. Krueger didn't realize he was walking into a funnel, and his body cam was recording every step. The body cam footage from the first mile shows subtle signs that something unusual was happening. Animal activity was way below normal levels for that season and time of the day. Birds were present, but seemed nervous, with flight patterns that suggested they were deliberately avoiding certain areas of the forest. The big question was why. Why were they avoiding those areas? At 3:47 p.m., Krueger found physical evidence that switched his investigation from checking out weird reports to documenting creatures that weren't supposed to exist. He found footprints, larger than a human. Now these footprints measured 16 inches long and 8 inches wide, measurements that could only be made by something walking upright on 2 legs while weighing between 600 and 800 pounds. The footprints showed characteristics that were unmistakably consistent with authentic Bigfoot track evidence. 5 distinct toes with clear joint articulation, an opposable thumb arrangement that proved these creatures had hands capable of grasping and manipulating objects, and dermal ridge patterns that showed these definitely weren't fake carvings or misidentified bear prints. What made these tracks especially important was their freshness and the direction they indicated Bigfoot had been traveling. The prints were less than 12 hours old, made during the same time period when campers had reported coordinated vocalizations that suggested multiple Bigfoots were operating as a team in the immediate area. The tracks headed directly toward dense forest cover where intelligent creatures could watch human activity while staying completely hidden. Krueger spent 20 minutes carefully documenting every detail of the footprints, taking measurements and filming them from multiple angles. His body cam captured detailed footage that would later prove crucial when specialists analyzed it. The trail of footprints led directly into elevated terrain. Krueger followed the tracks for about half a mile before losing them on rocky ground that wouldn't hold impressions, but the direction was unmistakable. Whatever had made those prints was moving toward elevated positions that would provide excellent observation points for monitoring human activity in the valley below. The body cam timestamp shows 4:03 p.m. when Krueger made a discovery that revealed just how sophisticated Bigfoot's behavior really was. He found additional footprints that weren't following the same route as the previous tracks, but were paralleling his own path with disturbing precision. These newer tracks stayed about 40 yards to his right, matching his speed and direction perfectly while maintaining distance that kept the Bigfoot just outside normal human detection range. This was absolutely terrifying when you really thought about what it meant. Bigfoot wasn't just randomly traveling through the same area where Krueger happened to be hiking. It was deliberately following him, studying how he moved, staying at surveillance distance that allowed the creature to observe human behavior while remaining completely hidden. The parallel tracks showed that Bigfoot deliberately stepped in locations that minimized ground disturbance and reduced the risk of leaving obvious signs that might alert its human target to the surveillance operation. This level of tactical sophistication demonstrated that these creatures understood human tracking techniques and could counter standard methods used to detect wildlife in forests. On the audio, you could hear it. The woods had gone quiet. At 4:12 p.m., the Bigfoot that had been stalking Krueger revealed itself through vocalizations that demonstrated the sophisticated communication capabilities that made these creatures so remarkable and dangerous. The first call came from the forest to Krueger's right, exactly where the parallel tracks suggested his pursuer was positioned. The vocalization was unlike anything in standard wildlife biology, combining incredible depth and complexity that proved it was intentional communication rather than an instinctive animal response. The sound lasted about 6 seconds. You can hear it clearly on the recording, harmonic variations that suggest actual language capability. 3 minutes later, the vocalization was repeated from a completely different location, proving the creature had moved while maintaining perfect surveillance of Krueger's position. Then a third call came from Krueger's left side, revealing that multiple Bigfoots were now involved in what appeared to be a coordinated operation designed to surround him and control his movement options. These creatures were talking to each other while positioning themselves tactically to maximize their advantage in whatever confrontation they were planning. The Bigfoot calls continued at irregular intervals as the creatures maneuvered through the forest around Krueger's position. The body cam audio picks up each call clearly, immediately answered by others, creating a communication network that allowed real-time coordination of their positioning and adjustments based on how Krueger was moving. At 4:19 p.m., Krueger entered a small clearing where the afternoon sunlight provided perfect conditions for what would become the most detailed visual documentation of Bigfoot appearance and behavior ever recorded. And then the camera finally captures it in full view. The lead Bigfoot stood about 60 yards ahead, positioned beside a fallen tree where it had apparently been doing some kind of foraging while maintaining observation of the approaching human. This Bigfoot was absolutely massive, beyond anything Krueger could have imagined possible for any North American creature. Standing fully upright, it was at least 7.5 feet tall, with a body structure that combined human-like proportions with muscle mass that exceeded anything in known animal anatomy. The shoulders were incredibly broad, supporting arms that hung past where the knees would be on a human, ending in hands that showed remarkable size and obvious dexterity. The creature was covered in dark brown hair that hung in thick clumps over visible muscle definition, dense, well-maintained, not the messy coat people usually described. The head combined human and ape features, cone-shaped skull with a pronounced sagittal crest. The face showed intelligence despite features clearly adapted for a different evolutionary path. The eyes were positioned forward like a predator's. They showed awareness, conscious thought, not instinct. Bigfoot was thinking. For 8 seconds, Krueger watched it forage near the log. The hands manipulated decaying wood with precision, searching for grubs or protein, purposeful, deliberate movements. The body cam captures the exact moment. The Bigfoot turned and made direct eye contact. The eyes were positioned forward like a predator's, locked directly on Krueger with an intensity that was impossible to ignore. They showed awareness, conscious thought, not instinct. The creature wasn't reacting on autopilot like an animal caught off guard. The Bigfoot was thinking, processing, and evaluating the human standing in front of it. Those eyes held calculation and intent that went far beyond anything you'd see in even the most intelligent animals. The moment lasted 2 seconds. Krueger saw it happen in real time. Recognition, assessment, decision. The creature's expression shifted from evaluation to aggression. Lips pulled back, revealing teeth designed for meat, a clear threat display. The roar, captured on audio so clearly you can feel it, was unlike anything in documented wildlife. And the message was unmistakable: leave now or die. Krueger ran. Behind him, the creature didn't panic. It moved with controlled aggression, completely confident it could end the chase whenever it wanted. The Bigfoot covered ground with enormous strides, maintaining perfect balance even on difficult terrain. Each step covered what would take Krueger 3 or 4. You could hear controlled breathing aside from Krueger's tedious breathing, much different from his that was so clear in the audio, but a steady, effortless rhythm. The creature wasn't even trying. It was controlling the chase. During the chase, Krueger heard his pursuer making shorter calls that were immediately answered from other locations throughout the forest. Bigfoot was communicating with the others, coordinating positions, sharing information about his movements and potential escape routes. The forest erupted with answering calls from multiple directions. Krueger wasn't being chased by a single creature, but by a coordinated group positioned to cut off every escape route. The Bigfoot family worked together with tactical sophistication, controlling his movements to ensure the outcome they wanted. 90 seconds in, it became clear that the lead Bigfoot was controlling the distance rather than pursuing at full speed. The sounds would surge closer. Krueger could hear its breathing, its footsteps, then fall back, maintaining psychological pressure without overtaking him. This wasn't normal predatory behavior. This was psychological warfare conducted by something intelligent enough to understand the terror value of controlled intimidation. The pursuit behavior demonstrated intelligence and tactical thinking that went beyond what anyone expected. These beings understood human psychology well enough to maximize fear while maintaining complete control over the encounter. At 4:20 p.m., the psychological intimidation ended. Krueger stumbled over an exposed root and crashed to the forest floor. His body cam recorded the impact and the terrifying speed with which the creature closed the final distance. Before Krueger could even attempt to get up, Bigfoot was on top of him. The camera shakes violently as a massive hand grabbed Krueger's shoulder and flipped him from face down to face up with casual effort that revealed how completely outmatched human strength was against Bigfoot power. The creature could have caused devastating injury, but was choosing to demonstrate dominance instead. Up close, the Bigfoot was even more incredible and terrifying than it had appeared from a distance. The facial features showed unmistakable intelligence despite anatomical adaptations for a completely different evolutionary pathway. The eyes held awareness and evaluation, conscious thought, not instinct. The creature was studying Krueger with what looked like scientific curiosity, while simultaneously asserting physical dominance, leaving no doubt about who controlled the encounter. The creature's breath carried the smell of meat and organic matter, a diet completely outside human experience. When it opened its mouth, the teeth were adapted for crushing and tearing with strength far beyond human capability, designed for prey that would challenge even the largest known predators. When Krueger tried to draw his sidearm, the creature's response made human defenses completely useless. One casual swipe sent the weapon spinning into the underbrush with enough force to bend the metal frame. The movement was so fast that Krueger's eyes couldn't even track it. Bigfoot grabbed both of Krueger's legs and began dragging him across the forest floor. Krueger tried to slow himself by clawing at the ground, but his efforts were useless against the strength that treated his body weight as negligible. After about 20 feet, the creature stopped and positioned itself directly over him in a dominance display that left no doubt about the power hierarchy. This was the moment Krueger was certain he was about to die. Everything about the encounter had demonstrated that human technology, training, and physical capability were meaningless against creatures that combined apex predator strength with intelligence that approached or exceeded human strategic thinking. There was no reasonable expectation he would survive whatever came next. But instead of attacking, the creature released a shorter, sharper vocalization. The body cam catches it all. Within seconds, 2 additional Bigfoots emerged from concealed positions in the surrounding forest. Krueger had been completely surrounded throughout the entire encounter. The coordination required for this positioning demonstrated tactical planning and operational discipline that exceeded anything in known animal social structures. The second Bigfoot was slightly smaller than the first, possibly female, with similar dark brown coloring but less pronounced muscular development and a smaller sagittal ridge that might indicate sexual dimorphism. The third was clearly a juvenile, approximately 4 feet tall, but already showing the robust build that would eventually make it as formidable as the adults. This was a family unit with protective motivations and social bonds that would influence how they managed human contact. The three creatures positioned themselves around Krueger in a triangular formation, demonstrating coordinated tactical thinking. Their positioning prevented escape in any direction, while allowing each creature to maintain visual contact with the others for continued communication. The formation was precisely calculated to maximize control while minimizing the possibility that Krueger could create unexpected complications. The communication between the three Bigfoots was remarkably complex. The vocalizations were subtle and controlled, suggesting language capability that allowed detailed coordination without creating noise that might attract other humans. The creatures were clearly discussing Krueger, his status, his equipment, their intentions for how this would end. All three showed intense interest in Krueger's technology and equipment. The footage shows the juvenile leaning in close, its face filling the frame as it examines the body cam itself with obvious curiosity. Carefully examining his uniform, radio, and body cam with obvious curiosity about human capabilities. The footage also shows the possible female studying his boots and clothing with attention that suggested she was documenting human appearance and equipment for future reference. Their behavior indicated they understood that human technology represented capabilities that could affect future encounters, and that gathering intelligence about it was strategically important for their own security and avoiding detection. Their curiosity was scientific rather than casual. These beings understood cause and effect and were actively learning about human capabilities that might impact their survival and territorial control. The examination continued for approximately 5 minutes as the creatures communicated in their vocal language about whatever conclusions they were drawing about human technology and Krueger's role as a ranger. Their discussion was clearly detailed and analytical, suggesting cognitive capabilities that allowed complex information processing and strategic decision-making about the long-term implications of human contact. The adult male made a final vocalization that seemed to conclude their analysis and communicate their decision. The message was unmistakable, conveyed through posture, vocal tone, and direct eye contact, transcending language and conveying a crystal-clear meaning about territorial ownership and human status within their territory. The message was simple and clear. This territory belongs to us. You exist here only because we allow it. Leave now and do not return, or the next encounter will end differently. The three Bigfoots turned and walked back into the forest, moving silently despite their massive size and the dense undergrowth. Their departure was as controlled and tactical as their approach, demonstrating stealth capabilities that would make them nearly impossible to track unless they chose to reveal themselves. Within seconds, they had vanished completely into terrain that offered limited concealment, proving their knowledge of the environment and movement skills were far superior to anything human tracking could match. Krueger remained motionless on the ground for a full minute after the creatures disappeared, too stunned to process the implications of surviving an encounter that should have ended with his death. Everything about the interaction had demonstrated that these creatures possessed intelligence, tactical capability, and physical dominance that made them the true controllers of wilderness territory humans believed they managed. The Bigfoot family's behavior revealed social structure, communication capabilities, and strategic thinking that challenged every assumption about what kinds of intelligent life existed in North America's wilderness. Their coordination, restraint, and territorial messaging indicated these creatures were far more than the primitive forest dwellers most people imagined. They were intelligent beings with sophisticated understanding of human behavior and the strategic implications of contact between species. Most remarkably, the creatures had chosen to demonstrate their dominance without killing, suggesting decision-making that included consideration of long-term consequences and strategic thinking about human Bigfoot relationships beyond immediate territorial defense. Their message had been delivered with precision that ensured understanding while avoiding escalation that might attract unwanted attention from authorities or military response. The body cam footage of this entire encounter would provide unprecedented documentation of Bigfoot intelligence, behavior, and capabilities that challenged everything mainstream science believed about primate evolution and cognitive development. The 3 hours and 43 minutes of high-definition video and audio represented the most comprehensive evidence ever recorded of creatures whose existence had implications extending into questions of national security and human dominance over North American wilderness. The footage documented creatures that possessed tactical coordination, sophisticated communication, advanced problem-solving, and social structure, indicating intelligence approaching or potentially exceeding human cognitive capability in wilderness survival and territorial management. Most significantly, it provided evidence that these beings had been studying human behavior for extended periods, learning operational protocols, and developing strategic approaches to contact that allowed them to maintain complete control over when and how encounters occurred. What made this footage remarkable was how it revealed Bigfoot intelligence operating on multiple levels simultaneously. These creatures were conducting surveillance, coordinating family activities, assessing human technology, making tactical decisions about threats, and communicating complex information between individuals, all while managing a contact situation that required split-second adjustments. The family demonstrated understanding of human psychology that allowed them to maximize intimidation while controlling escalation, knowledge of forest ecosystems that gave them complete tactical advantage, and decision-making that weighed long-term strategic considerations against immediate territorial defense. These were not primitive creatures responding to instinct. These were intelligent beings making calculated decisions about how to manage their relationship with a species they recognized as technologically advanced but physically inferior. Ranger David Krueger's body cam footage proves that North America's wilderness areas are home to creatures whose intelligence and capabilities pose a fundamental challenge to human assumptions about which species actually control these environments and what kinds of encounters might be possible when humans venture into territory these beings consider their own. The implications extend beyond proving Bigfoots exist. It demonstrates that these creatures have successfully managed human contact for decades or centuries, revealing themselves only when it serves their objectives, while maintaining security that has kept their true capabilities hidden from scientific investigation. Dr. Janet Williamson had been a wildlife biologist for 30 years, working out of Ocala, California. She had zero interest in Bigfoot research. She considered it junk science, and she had said exactly that in scientific publications when the topic came up. The area where she set up her cameras in the summer of 2025, the Bluff Creek watershed in Six Rivers National Forest, was famous for being the location where the 1967 Patterson-Gimlin Bigfoot film was shot. That history meant nothing to her. She picked the location because the bear den data she could gather there was worth the drive from Ocala. She had set up 12 high-resolution motion-activated cameras across a 15-square-mile study area. On September 22nd, during a routine check of her cameras, she removed the memory card from camera 9 and drove back to her field station near the park boundary. When she watched the footage from September 14th and the clip from 2:47 p.m. started playing on her laptop screen, she absolutely couldn't believe her eyes. Then she closed her laptop, sat with it closed for a few minutes, and opened it again to make sure she wasn't hallucinating. She spent the next 2 weeks at that field station before she told anyone what she had found. The clip opens on an empty meadow bathed in full afternoon sunlight. Wildflowers spread across the ground, lupine, paintbrush, and columbine swaying slowly in a light breeze, every detail sharp and true to color in the 4K image. The light is bright and even, the kind of mid-afternoon sun that wipes out shadows and shows everything exactly as it is. There is no darkness to hide blurriness in. There is no distance to hide uncertainty about size. Everything that happens in the next 77 seconds happens right out in the open, in the light, with the subject just 35 feet from a camera that can resolve individual hairs. At the 2-second mark, Bigfoot walks into the frame from the right side. The creature is 8 feet tall, a number arrived at by comparing it against plants and trees of known height in the frame, a measurement confirmed by multiple independent analysts, all working from the same footage. It walks upright on 2 legs with a way of moving that is completely different from any human walking pattern. A smooth forward motion that carries a huge amount of body mass with such efficiency that it looks as if the body were specifically built for this kind of terrain and this kind of pace. The hair covering its entire body is reddish-brown, thick and shaggy, ranging from about 4 to 6 inches long across most of its torso, and getting longer and matted down on its arms and legs. In the bright daylight, you can see individual strands, moving on their own in the meadow breeze, layered in different directions, darker along the spine, and lighter across the chest and inner arms in the kind of natural color variation that happens in real animal coats and does not happen to fake fur made in a factory. The shoulders are the first thing that makes every viewer pause, regardless of whether they believe in Bigfoot. They are estimated at 4.5 feet across, a width that does not exist in any known primate, and that creates a body shape that is obviously different from every human silhouette, no matter what angle the camera is at. The arms hang all the way past the knees, swinging back and forth in natural rhythm with the walking stride, the same way arms swing when any 2-legged creature walks, but at a length that has no match in any human being. The hands are visible throughout the whole clip, enormous, 5-fingered, with an opposable thumb and thick padded palms that look structurally similar to the hands of a great ape, but much bigger than anything in the primate record. The muscles underneath the coat are so visible that as the creature walks, one can see the large muscles across the top of its shoulders bunch and release with each arm swing. The broad muscles along its back engage and relax with every rotation of each stride. This is not a simple surface. This is not padding sitting on top of a stiff frame. What the footage is showing is the movement of a living body underneath skin and hair. Real muscles doing real work, producing the kind of movement under the surface that only happens in large, powerful living animals and cannot be faked by anything worn on top of a human body or a rigid frame underneath a costume. The way it walked attracted immediate attention from every movement expert who looked at the footage. The pattern is what scientists call a compliant gait. The knee stays slightly bent throughout the walking cycle, never straightening all the way to the locked, straight leg position that is completely normal and natural in human walking. This creates a distinctive rolling forward motion, a continuous weight transfer through a bent knee contact that keeps the body's center of gravity low and steady. In the footage, the creature crosses the entire meadow without any change in that bent knee pattern, without any of the little corrections a person would make when trying to hold an unnatural walking style over distance. The movement is not something it is doing on purpose. It is simply just how it walks. The footprints it leaves in the soft ground near the edge of the meadow are visible in the footage itself and were still recoverable when Dr. Williamson visited the site 8 days later. They measured 16 to 18 inches long. The distance between footprints was about 5.5 feet, a stride length that is completely impossible to match with human walking mechanics at any height. At the 14-second mark, the creature turns and looks directly at the camera. This moment shows up in every analysis, every presentation, every review of the footage, no matter what conclusion the reviewer eventually reaches, because it is the moment that forces the big question that the rest of the clip hints at, but never fully answers. The face is clearly visible, facing straight at the camera for 3.2 seconds, long enough to capture in detail, long enough to go through frame by frame, long enough to see exactly what is looking back. The head is cone-shaped, with a raised bony ridge running front to back across the top of the skull, similar to the ridge you see on a full-grown male gorilla, but bigger and longer. The face is partly covered in hair, but the features are completely clear. A flat nose with wide nostrils, deep-set eyes sitting beneath a heavy, overhanging brow ridge, high cheekbones, and a wide mouth. The skin visible around the eyes and nose is very dark, almost black, with a rough, thick texture that the high resolution picks up clearly. The look of skin that has spent years exposed to sun, wind, and rain. The eyes also have visible whites. The white part of the eye, called the sclera, is visible around dark irises that are focused directly on the camera lens, not on the meadow around it, not even on the tree line in the distance, but on the lens itself. Those eyes are looking at the specific device attached to the Douglas fir tree, and the expression they carry is intelligent, aware, and sizing things up. The creature is not scared of the camera. It is not backing away from it. It is studying it with focused attention, suggesting it either understands what a camera is, or at minimum is carefully assessing a strange object it has found in territory it knows well. And then it looks away and keeps walking. At the 20-second mark, the hands become the center of attention. The creature reaches down and pinches a plant from the meadow floor, a precise grip between its thumb and one finger. Its hand brings the plant up to its mouth. The jaw moves in the way primate jaws move when chewing, not just up and down, but side to side as well, with the lower jaw rotating in a grinding motion too. It chews the plant material, swallows, and keeps walking. The whole thing takes 8 seconds and is captured with total clarity from 35 feet away in afternoon sunlight. There is no question about what is happening. A large, upright, two-legged primate is picking and eating a plant in a meadow in Northern California on a September afternoon, and a camera that was set up to study bears is recording every second of it. The 44-second mark is the most analyzed moment in the entire footage, and the one that generated the most serious discussion in every expert review session. In the middle of the meadow, the creature stops walking and looks up toward a dead standing tree at the edge of the clearing, a snag that sticks up above the surrounding vegetation. A dead branch sticks out from the snag at roughly the creature's shoulder height, about 6 feet long and 3 inches across at the base where it meets the trunk. The creature reaches up with both hands, grabs the branch near where it connects to the trunk, and yanks it downward in one sharp motion. The snap is clearly picked up by the camera's microphone. A loud crack, followed by the sound of splintering wood. Breaking a branch 3 inches thick and 6 feet long, even when it is dead and dry, takes real force. For a person, it is a two-handed job that requires using their whole body weight and pushing off for leverage, not just arm strength. The creature in the footage produces that same break with a single downward pull that does not look like it takes any particular effort. The branch just comes off. Bigfoot turns the branch over in both hands and looks at it. Then it reaches the branch over one shoulder and uses the broken end to scratch its back, stretching across to reach a specific spot, adjusting the angle of the branch twice to get to exactly the right location. The whole thing clearly and obviously on purpose. This is the creature identifying a problem, an itch, then choosing an object from its environment, adjusting it to make it useful, and using it for a specific purpose. The full sequence from reaching for the branch to finishing the scratching lasts 11 seconds. It is the clearest footage of Bigfoot using a tool that has ever been recorded, and it happens in bright daylight, up close, in high resolution, with nothing between the camera and the subject. At 1 minute and 3 seconds, the creature drops the branch, starts walking again, and crosses the remaining 40 feet of meadow in that same rolling, bent-knee stride, heading toward the forest on the far side. The footprints it leaves in the soft ground near the far edge of the meadow are deep and clean enough that Dr. Williamson will be able to make plaster casts of 4 of them during her follow-up visit to the site 8 days later. The creature reaches the tree line and steps into the shade of the old-growth forest. Before it disappears completely, it stops and looks back. The look back lasts just over 2 seconds. The head turns back toward the camera, the face partly visible in the edge between the open meadow light and the deeper shadow of the forest. the eyes finding the lens one more time. This final moment is the one Dr. Williamson kept returning to in every conversation about the footage. Not because it was the most dramatic looking, but because the question it raised was never answered by the analysis that followed. Did the creature look back because it heard the camera's motion sensor trigger? Or had it been aware of the camera from the very first second it stepped into the meadow? And was it now making one last check before leaving? Or was it something else entirely? None of the analysts who reviewed the footage over the following months could give a definitive answer. And the answer mattered because it determined whether what the footage showed was a total accident. A wild animal crossing an open field unaware of the device recording it, or something much more complicated and deliberate than that. Then the creature turned and was gone. 77 seconds from its first appearance to its last. The meadow was empty again. The wildflowers kept moving in the breeze the same way they had been the whole time. Dr. Williamson spent the next 2 weeks going through the footage frame by frame, not to decide what to do with it, but because there were specific things visible in the clip that she kept being frightened by. At the 2-second mark, when Bigfoot first enters the frame and is walking in full afternoon sun, the individual strands across its shoulders are doing something that takes a second to spot. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. They are moving independently, not as a layer, not as a mat, but as separate pieces of hair of different lengths, catching the breeze at different speeds and in different directions, exactly the way real hair of that length behaves on a living animal in an open field. The strands along the spine are darker and lie flatter. The hair across the outer arms is longer and lifts more easily. Across the chest and inner arms, where the coloring is lighter, the texture is different again. Finer, less dense, the way an animal's undercoat looks different from the outer coat in direct sunlight. All of that is visible on camera from 35 feet away. And none of it is something fake fur does. Fake fur moves as one flat surface. The footage shows how real hair grows. The second thing she kept returning to was the face at the 14-second mark. Not the overall shape, but the eyes. The 3.2 seconds the face is fully visible are long enough to go through frame by frame, and when you do, what you find is not a blank stare. The gaze moves. In the first frames, the eyes are looking directly at the lens. In the middle frames, there is a small, barely visible shift, the eyes shifting slightly, the way eyes move when a brain is actually processing what it is looking at, not just staring in a direction. In the final frames, before Bigfoot looks away, the expression has changed in a way that is hard to describe precisely once it is seen. The focus is still there, but something else has joined it. Whatever the look back at the end of the clip was about, the face at 14 seconds shows clearly that whatever was in that meadow was not looking at the camera the way an animal looks at an unfamiliar object. It was looking at it the way you look at something you are trying to figure out. The third thing, and the one that generated the most discussion when Dr. Williamson eventually showed the footage to other researchers, was the tool use sequence at the 44-second mark, specifically what happens right after the branch snaps. The snap alone is already hard to explain. The branch is 3 inches thick at the base, and breaking it takes a single downward pull with both hands. No visible effort. No strain on the face, just the crack and the branch coming off. But what happens in the 2 seconds right after the snap is the part that nobody who watches it carefully can explain away. Bigfoot holds the branch and looks at it. The head tilts very slightly to one side. The branch is turned over once in both hands, and then, without any pause or guessing, the branch goes straight over one shoulder to the exact spot on the back that needs scratching. The angle is set right away, adjusted twice to get it exactly right, and the whole thing is done in 11 seconds. There is no fumbling, there is no trial and error. It looked at the object, understood what it could do with it, and used it correctly on the first try. That 3-step process, look, understand, use, is not instinct. It is not trained behavior. It is problem solving, happening on camera, in real time, at 35 feet, in full afternoon sun. But the tool use sequence is not the only moment in the footage where that kind of thinking shows up. It is just the easiest one to see. Go back to the 22-second mark, the the plant selection. The hand reaching down is not just grabbing at whatever is closest. The thumb and one finger close around a specific stem at a specific point on that stem, and the grip is controlled enough that the whole root comes free without the stem snapping. That means knowing exactly how hard to pull and at what angle. It means feeling the resistance of that specific plant in that specific ground and adjusting. When the plant reaches the mouth, the jaw does not open wide the way an animal tears at food. The bite is selective. A specific part of the plant is consumed, not the whole thing, and the part that is not eaten is visible in the footage, held briefly in the other hand, and then released. The choosing, the pulling, the selective eating, every single step is on purpose. Every step means knowing what the plant is and which part is actually worth eating. At the 55-second mark, something happens that is easy to miss the first time you watch, but once you notice it, you cannot stop seeing it. Bigfoot, having finished with the branch and started walking toward the tree line, slows slightly and turns its head to the left. Not a full head turn, just a small rotation, maybe 15 degrees, the kind of movement you make when something at the edge of your vision has registered. The camera does not show what it is looking at. The tree line on that side is dense, and the frame does not go far enough to show what is there. But the response is exact. It is not the wide, sweeping head movement of an animal reacting to a general noise. It is the small, controlled turn of something that has already pinpointed exactly where a specific sound came from. The head holds that angle for approximately 1 second. Then Bigfoot turns back toward the tree line and keeps walking at the same pace. Whatever was there was noticed, checked, and dismissed, all in 1 second, without breaking stride. At the 58-second mark, the right hand drops slightly, and the fingers spread. It is quick and almost invisible, the kind of thing you miss completely at normal speed and only catch when you slow the clip down and track the hand specifically. The fingers spread, then close loosely, not into a fist, but into a relaxed half curl. Then the arm goes back to its normal swing. The whole thing lasts less than a second, but what it shows is a hand making a small movement that has nothing to do with walking. A flex, a release, the kind of thing a person does when they have been holding something tight and are letting the tension out of their hand. In the footage, this happens 4 seconds before Bigfoot drops the branch at the 1-minute 3-second mark. That means the hand movement at 58 seconds is not leftover tension from holding the branch. It is something else. The hand is responding to something not visible in the frame or to nothing outside at all, just the hand of a large primate, doing what hands do when they belong to something that is thinking. At 1 minute and 3 seconds, when Bigfoot drops the branch, there is a second sound underneath it that is almost completely hidden by the impact. It lasts about 0.4 seconds and appears in the lower range of the audio spectrum. It is not wind. The wind through the meadow is steady across the whole clip and sounds different. It is not the branch bouncing or settling. That sound is higher and shorter. The 0.4 second sound is soft and controlled, coming from roughly the height of Bigfoot's chest. It is the kind of sound a large primate makes when it breathes out through almost closed lips. Not a word, not a call, just air being let out in a controlled way by a body that is choosing how to breathe. It happens once and is not repeated, and it is the only sound in the entire 77 seconds, other than the branch snap and the footsteps, that comes directly from Bigfoot. The look back at 1 minute and 15 seconds, the last moment before the tree line closes, has a detail that most people do not notice until they have watched the clip enough times for the initial shock to wear off. On a first watch, the look back looks like one movement. The head turns, the eyes find the camera, the head turns back, and the forest takes everything. But when that section is slowed down, the head turn is not one movement, it is two. Bigfoot turns its head toward the camera, holds eye contact for just over 2 seconds, and then, before turning back toward the forest, the head moves again. A very small second rotation, maybe 5 degrees, further in the direction it is already looking. Not away from it, further toward it, as if 2 seconds of looking was not quite enough. The second rotation holds for less than a single frame, less than a 30th of a second, and then the head completes its turn, and the forest takes everything. That small second rotation changes everything about the look back. A reaction to sound produces one head turn toward the source, followed by movement away. A final check before leaving elicits one head turn, then departure. What the footage shows is something that does both of those things, and then makes one more small movement in the same direction, not correcting course, not reacting to anything new, just extending a look that was already finished by a fraction of a second and a fraction of a degree, as if the look was not entirely its own choice, as if something in that meadow found it hard, at the very last moment, to look away. The meadow is empty. The wildflowers are still moving. Camera 9 records another 40 seconds of the empty frame before the motion sensor resets. In those 40 seconds, there is nothing. No movement in the tree line, no sound on the microphone, no sign that anything had been in the meadow at all. 77 seconds. Reddish-brown hair moving as individual growth in the meadow breeze. Shoulders 4.5 feet wide, arms hanging past the knees. A face turning toward the camera at 14 seconds with irises that move, and an expression that changes across 3.2 seconds of direct eye contact. A hand closing around a specific plant stem at 22 seconds with a calibrated grip that brings the root system free and intact. A branch snapped at 44 seconds with a single downward pull that produced no visible effort, then turned over once, assessed, and applied correctly on the first attempt. A head rotation at 55 seconds towards something at the edge of the frame, held for 1 second and then released. A hand flexing at 58 seconds for no visible external reason. A sound at 1 minute and 3 seconds that sits in the frequency range of a controlled exhale from a large primate's chest. A look back at 1 minute and 15 seconds with a micro rotation at the end that extends the gaze by a fraction of a second, past the point where the look was complete.